Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our free April 2025 webinar, QBO and Apps, Diagnosing and Avoiding Integration Nightmares. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. So as you're joining, let me know in the chat where you're joining me from. This is a ritual or tradition that we have here when we do our webinars. We love to see where everybody's joining us from. And that way I also know that you can hear me. So let me know where you're joining from. And I see we have Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer from San Francisco. Welcome to the webinar. Sarah from South Louisiana, Mindy from Ohio, Carrie from Michigan, Amber from Michigan as well. And now the chat goes crazy and I lose my place. Let me see who else we have. Victoria from South Carolina. Rhonda again, South Carolina. I seem to pick the same people from the same states. Victoria from Warrington, Pennsylvania. Sherry Ann from Katy, Texas, very close to where I live. Jessica from Philadelphia. Dawn from Virginia Beach. Andrew from Los Angeles, Heather from Scotland. Wow. Thank you for joining us. I love it when we get attendees from other parts of the world. I think that's wonderful. Wendy from Florida. Hola, Wendy. Let's see. Rosalinda from Cape Coral, Florida. Dennis from Long Island, New York. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. And if you signed up for last month's webinar, you know that I was sick. Usually we get allergies in our parts of South Texas or Southeast Texas. And so the allergies got me and I woke up that morning. I didn't have a voice. So I thought, well, it's just not going to work. Didn't have a voice and I just kept coughing. So thank you for joining me. If you signed up for last month's webinar, thanks for joining, or if you're new to my content, thank you for joining me also. So let's see. Great. Well, I'm so glad that you're all here with me today. And let's go ahead and get started. Let me get the right screen in front of me here. So my name is Veronica Wasek. I'm the unstoppable introvert. I founded the 5-Minute Bookkeeping Facebook group and the website called 5-Minute Bookkeeping. So anything 5-Minute Bookkeeping, that's me. And also founded 5MB Academy, where I empower virtual bookkeepers to become confident professionals and to build thriving businesses. You can find me on social media at 5-Minute Bookkeeping. And one of the things that I love to do is to empower bookkeepers to build the business and life of their dreams. And I feel like I'm living the life of my dreams currently. My husband and I bought a 90-acre farm in 2021 and love going there every weekend. We're actually building a house there. For those of you who are keeping up with the construction story, we're still building the house. So we're in the hopefully finishing stages, but it's just taking a little bit longer than expected, just because we want everything to be done just as it should be done correctly. So if you built a house or built a custom home, you probably feel my pain. You know what that's like. But hopefully within the next 2 months, the house will be ready. But we have a beautiful farm, beautiful sunsets, trees, grass, bluebonnets, and wildflowers, butterflies. We love going there. So just some administrative announcements for you guys. And first of all, this presentation is subject to copyright, so you may not record the presentation for purposes of sharing it on YouTube or social media, and you may not share the handout on social media. Speaking of handouts, there is a handout. You should see that in the handout tabs. If you don't worry about it. Probably my assistant, Jill, is also giving you a link to that handout. So you'll be able to get it there. And if you don't find it there, we will mail or email the recording of today's session as well as the handout to everyone who signed up for the webinar. So if you have to leave early, no worries. We will send you the recording and the link to the handout. You may use the chat to, if I ask you a question and you want to answer, go ahead and use the chat. If you want to chat amongst yourselves, go ahead and do that as well. As I mentioned, my assistant, Jill Keel, will be in the chat and sharing links or other things that I may talk about. She will be there sharing those links. And if you have a question for me, please put that question in the Q&A tab and not in the chat. Because there's so much activity in the chat, it's very hard for me to go through the chat to find your questions. So just put them in the Q&A and I will do my best to answer your questions. I try to answer all the questions. Sometimes we run out of time, but I do my best to answer your questions. So what are we going to cover today? So again, the topic of today's session is QBO and apps and really avoiding and even knowing what those integration nightmares are from the perspective of doing cleanups and working with clients who are using integrations, or maybe if you're getting a client and thinking that you need to integrate an app that they're using with QuickBooks and really knowing what the best practices are for even approaching that subject. So what we will cover today, number one, have we been misled? So we're going to answer the question of have we been misled about QBO and apps? Next, we will discuss common QBO integration challenges. Then we'll talk about app integration cleanup strategies, and then we'll go into some Q&A. So let's start with answering the question, have we been misled about QBO and apps? When QuickBooks Online first really became very popular, the whole premise of using QuickBooks Online wasn't, it was, yes, of course, it's easy to get to, it's cloud-based, it's virtual, we can all use it, but the other, I guess, marketing message that was being pushed was that, well, you can integrate QuickBooks with all of these apps. And in fact, Intuit Corporation opened up the what's called an API, or the connection, if you will, between QuickBooks and other apps. They opened it up to all of these app developers, similar to like when you go in your phone and you look for all these apps that may integrate or that you can download onto your phone. That was the vision for QuickBooks, that, okay, we have QuickBooks and then we can integrate all of these software applications and or apps and be able to make things so much easier. But have we been misled? There are these marketing messages to business owners and bookkeepers about apps. You may have heard this, and let me know in the chat. Have you seen these messages? Have you come across this? That you can save time on data entry. So if we connect QuickBooks with an app, we can save time on data entry. We can reduce manual tasks. It's so easy to integrate QuickBooks with an app. You can just set it and forget it. And my favorite, you can automate your bookkeeping. So let me know in the chat, have you seen and come across these messages? And let me put my chat where I can see it. Yes, Lisa says, yeah, absolutely. And, you will see that. And then business owners, they hear that message. So then what do they start to think? That they don't need a bookkeeper. Yep. Sarah says, oh, heck yes. And Janine, she's seen them. Laura, yes. And so there's some good messaging there, but as I said, maybe we're being misled, or business owners are being misled, because now it's turning into business owners thinking they don't need a bookkeeper, which, that's not good for us as bookkeepers. And then what do bookkeepers think? They think that you don't need to know how to record the transactions because the app will do it for you. And I've seen many of you do that, hey, I'll just connect QuickBooks with this app and then send the 5,000 transactions that they had for the whole year because it'll save me so much time. I don't have to do it. The app will do it. And then you find out that, maybe that integration didn't go so well. And now we've dumped 5,000 transactions into QuickBooks. So there are some misleading messages there. The reality is that there can be bad integrations between QuickBooks and other software applications. There's the data dump that we will talk about. But as I said, the 5,000 transactions going into QuickBooks and now they didn't go in there correctly. We can't really reconcile transactions that are going into QuickBooks necessarily. And we'll talk more about reconciling. And it all leads to some really big cleanups. So why is this happening? Well, first of all, the people who are making the apps, so the app developers are not accountants, and they don't necessarily ask for input from accountants, or sometimes some of them will come to me and say, well, can you look at what we've done and maybe give us your opinion, but they're not really engaging with me as a subject matter expert. They just want, somebody to look at it for free and kind of say like, oh, I like it, don't like it. But they're not really working with accountants and bookkeepers to really be part of the development team. Also, app developers are focused on sending data to QuickBooks. So let's send the 5,000 transactions to QuickBooks, but they don't think about what happens when those transactions get to QuickBooks. But the bookkeepers buy into the idea of saving time, and business owners just want to save time and automate. And so a lot of these ways of thinking are leading to problems when we do these integrations. And the reality is, and I hate to burst your bubble, but in my 15 years as a bookkeeping firm owner, and after doing hundreds of cleanups, I learned that in most cases, you're better off not connecting an app to QuickBooks because most app integrations don't work correctly. So let me know in the chat, what has been your experience with app integration? So have you connected an app to QuickBooks? Tell me which, was it maybe Square, Stripe, Shopify, Amazon, something else, PayPal even? Have you connected an app to QuickBooks? And what has been your experience, or what have you observed with your clients if they've tried to connect apps to QuickBooks? So let me know. Janine says, nope, I never connect. She started with Square. Miranda says, thank you. This is what I tell my clients all the time. Lori says, that's not the news you wanted to hear. I know, but it's better if you know than if you're dealing, as I said, with the 5,000 transactions that are in there. Now you have to figure out what to do. Alicia says, I hate most integrations. They're supposed to make it easier, but it seems they always make it harder, and they can. Tracy says she uses Sassant, which is an import tool, which actually, that's what we used to do in the old days. We just imported transactions. Julia's integrated PayPal. Teresa says her biggest client uses JobTread, and it integrates well. And yeah, and some do. I'm not saying that we have to avoid all integrations, but we have to go in with knowing the reality, and that most of the time you will have some issue unless you know what to look for, and we will get into that. Golda says Square didn't work at all. Jack rather says QBO's integration is a mess, even using automation third-party apps. Yes, absolutely. I agree. All right, so let's go to the next section. Common QBO integration challenges. So now that we know that maybe we shouldn't be just marrying QuickBooks and an app automatically, there are some things we need to be aware of. Then what are some of the challenges that we need to look at or even consider, either if a client already integrated QuickBooks with an app, or if a client thinks they want to integrate with an app, or if you think you need to integrate with an app. So the big problem is the data dump. Okay, so what I call the data dump is, I said, like, you connect QuickBooks with this app, and all of a sudden you've sent 5,000, 10,000, however many thousands of transactions into QuickBooks for multiple months, sometimes multiple years. And now we have a problem. So what's the first problem? Multitudes of individual transactions get sent to QuickBooks. So now imagine let's say if we're sending thousands of transactions every month into QuickBooks, which if you have, say, an e-commerce client, that can happen. And what happens in QuickBooks Online when you dump all this data into it? Well, what happens is it slows down. And I don't know if you have worked with a client whose database it has slowed down. It's just like snail pace to do anything, to run a report. Sometimes the reports won't be able to run in the browser, and then you'll get a message that says, well, I can run this report, but I'm going to have to export it. And so it's very painful, and it's not something that's sustainable. So the more transactions that you keep adding, the more it'll slow things down, and you can't sustain that. Not to mention the individual transactions and the cluttering of transactions that you would have in QuickBooks. So as I said, it'll slow down the performance in QuickBooks. You may also have incorrect chart of account mapping. So transactions may be going into QuickBooks, but now they're mapped to the wrong account category. You'll usually have duplicated transactions, sometimes because the app is duplicating, sometimes it's because the app is doing something and the untrained user in QuickBooks is doing something else. And I'll talk about some of those scenarios in a bit. And then you get the undeposited funds build up because the app is sending individual transactions to undeposited funds, and now it's just growing and growing, and we don't even know how to get stuff out of there. You also have to understand what the integration is doing in QuickBooks and avoid the data dump. So we need to talk about the types of syncs that you have between QuickBooks and apps, account and transaction mapping, sync errors, workflow customization, and reconciliation. So let's go over each one. Let's talk about the types of syncs that you may have between QuickBooks and other apps. First of all, you need to consider the integration method. So is the app directly integrating with QuickBooks, or are we using what we call a connector app that is connecting QuickBooks to another app? So for example, for an integration app, I don't know if you've heard of A2X or Bookkeep. They're fairly popular integrator apps that will integrate, say, something like Amazon or Shopify with QuickBooks. So they're sort of the middleman. Or, as I said, you may have just the app that you're using or that your client is using connects directly to QuickBooks. So you need to know the integration method. Then you need to understand whether you have an automated sync or integration or a manual integration. So is it something that we set it up and then just hit a button and everything starts going over to QuickBooks? Or in some apps, you have to manually go in, say every day or every week, and push a button so all the transactions go over to QuickBooks. There's also full versus partial syncs. Is the app sending every transaction over to QuickBooks? So for example, let's say that we have an inventory management application and it's tracking sales, it's tracking inventory, and it's tracking cost of goods sold. And some of those inventory apps will send all the transactions over to QuickBooks, including individual invoices, for example. Versus a partial sync, where we can send partial data to QuickBooks. So perhaps in that inventory management system, we're not going to send all of the individual sales transactions to QuickBooks, but we may want it to send inventory adjustments and cost of goods sold adjustments. That's something else we need to know about when we're looking at these app integrations. Also, the timing of the sync. So how often is the data being synced between QuickBooks and the app? Is it every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes? Is it maybe once a day? I use Forwardly to pay my vendors. And when I go into Forwardly, which is connected to my QuickBooks, it'll say, well, last sync was 8 hours ago. So I have to go in and push a little button so that it syncs again. So that's something to think about, especially if a client is working with real-time data and maybe they need, like if they made a sale, say on Amazon, they need that to update their inventory system within a minute, probably, to make sure that they have up-to-date data. Otherwise, they might be selling inventory that they don't have. And then consider whether the app is sending detailed transactions to QuickBooks or summarized transactions. So as I said earlier, in a lot of cases, we don't want all the detail going into QuickBooks because it'll clutter things up. Now, if you have a smaller client and maybe they have, let's say, 100 sales a month and they're sending individual transactions to QuickBooks, it's probably okay. But if you have a large client that is not dealing in the thousands of transactions, then we need to really think about, does it make sense to send all the detail over to QuickBooks? And so what is that app sending to QuickBooks? Do you have an option of detailed transactions versus summarized transactions? And does it, what makes sense? Should we send detailed transactions or summarized transactions? So for example, for e-commerce clients and especially Shopify clients that I have worked with, we would send summarized transactions to QuickBooks because we didn't need all the detail. Next, consider the account and transaction mapping. So we talked about the types of syncs that you may have, but then now, okay, we have to think about where is the data going in QuickBooks? How is it being mapped? How is it being categorized in QuickBooks? So first, consider account mapping. Where is the account getting recorded? And actually, let me back up a little bit. The account mapping is actually where we tell the transactions where to get recorded. So where is that account mapping? Is it in the app that your client is using? Is it in the integration app that you may be using? Is it in QuickBooks? So you have to know where to go in and maybe tell it, hey, I don't want it to go to sales of product income. I want it to go to this other account. Or maybe I don't want to use undeposited funds. I want it to use this other account. So you need to know where that account mapping is. Most of the time, if you're connecting QuickBooks to an app, that account mapping is in that app. Another challenge is you're limited to only specific account categories. For example, if you're using an app to manage sales, those sales may only be going to sales of product income. And then the app will not let you change to any other type of income account. And so you need to, again, find where that account mapping is and look at the options you have for where can I post income, for example, where can I post expenses. Also, how are the transactions going over to QuickBooks? What transaction types are being used? Is it invoices? Is it sales receipts? Is it journal entries? You need to understand that. So, for example, A2X, and Bookkeep, which are apps that are used to integrate QuickBooks with maybe Amazon or Shopify, they send journal entries to QuickBooks, and they send set up. Then consider whether the app integration is forcing you to use undeposited funds. So customer payments may be just being recorded to undeposited funds by this app, and maybe it's forcing you to use it, and maybe that's not the best way to record those transactions. And then you may have an inability to map other types of payments. So for example, in e-commerce, you may have different forms of payment that you are receiving, and then it's just forcing me to put it all in undeposited funds, and I don't have a way to use other accounts. So here's a sample account mapping for the PayPal connector by QuickBooks. And as you can see on the left, and actually this is a PayPal connector that resides in QuickBooks. So our account mapping is in QuickBooks. And then you can go in and you can see the different choices that you have for the different transaction categories and how we can categorize them. So for example, the PayPal balance account would go into a PayPal bank account. The account where funds are being deposited by PayPal go into checking. The discounts, what do we want the discounts to be recorded to, fees, etc. So a lot of these things also, they're pre-filled out for you, but you have to be careful because maybe that's not the right account or the account that would be the best account category to use for your client. Okay, I was just looking at the chat. Someone is having, so apparently, okay, hold on. Oh, okay. So Miranda says she has experienced PayPal duplicating transactions and it was terrible to clean up. Yes. Okay. So I think some of you were having some sort of video issues. I hope it's back. There's not a lot I can do here on my end, so I will keep going. Okay, so again, look for that account mapping. Make sure that you know where it resides, and also look at the accounts that are being used or transaction types being used. And as you can see here, we have the option of okay, you can choose another account. Sometimes you don't have that choice. And also understand the client's business and their specific needs. Because, again, there may be an integration, but it's not going to really suit your client and what they actually need. Okay. So next we have sync errors. So that's something else to be careful with, to be aware of. So we need to monitor sync errors. We need to troubleshoot them. And sometimes we have to resync a transaction. So let's talk more about that. So with sync errors, sometimes the app that you're using or the software that you're using, that your client is using, will change data after the fact. And so let's say a perfect example in Shopify, because they're notorious for this, that let's say a sale happens on day 1 and then day 30, something got changed and all of a sudden all the reports change. And so now we're trying to reconcile the transactions that were sent to QuickBooks and realizing that they no longer match what Shopify shows in their reporting. And that's because they allow changes in transactions. So think of it as, okay, we can't, like in QuickBooks, we can close the books, and so we can no longer make changes to those periods. Well, a lot of these apps just let you make changes whenever you want. And so we can have sync errors because now the data that made it to QuickBooks is no longer the data that is reflected on the app. Sometimes the sync doesn't work correctly. Sometimes transactions will be sent to QuickBooks, but maybe not all the transactions made it to QuickBooks, and you may have missing transactions. And that's why it's important to have a process of reconciling what was sent to QuickBooks. So is what QuickBooks shows as, let's say, sales, what really happened, And so even if we're using a sync, we have to reconcile things because we're not guaranteed that everything gets sent over to QuickBooks correctly. And then we need to troubleshoot those sync errors. We have to monitor, make sure that, okay, everything's reconciling. We have to make corrections. Sometimes you have to go in and resync transactions. So again, it's not magical, as I like to call it. It's not all automated. There's still some things that we need to do to make sure that everything is reconciling and that everything's going correctly into QuickBooks. And then we also need to think about customizing the workflow of, so if transactions are now getting sent to QuickBooks, how is that affecting the transaction workflow in QuickBooks? And it may be affected by the client's, the specific needs of the client, their industry. So for example, does the app integration address the specific needs of the client and their industry? So for example, as I said, with e-commerce, maybe we want summarized transactions sent to QuickBooks rather than detailed transactions. And then we also need to consider what transactions are getting sent to QuickBooks and how does it affect the transaction workflow in QuickBooks? So how does it affect the order of work and transactions in QuickBooks? Which transactions is the app recording and how do they affect the workflow in QuickBooks? And we'll take a look at how app transactions are affecting workflow. So I know I'm very visual, so I'll show you some examples here. And Teresa says, it's frustrating when you are using an app where clearly the developers don't understand the importance of consistency. And absolutely. It's very frustrating. And again, because of the messaging that we're receiving of we can automate, we can save so much time. And I would say that, yes, we can save time, but then on manual data entry, which is, nobody wants to do that anymore. But now we have to add onto the reconciliation piece, excuse me, and really making sure that, as I said, everything's getting into QuickBooks correctly, and then we know what to do. So let's kind of go into more of this detail. So let's look at an example here of the apps and the app and the client are messing up the workflow in QuickBooks. So the app on the left is sending a customer invoice to QuickBooks, which is great, right? We don't have to enter that invoice in QuickBooks. But then the untrained client goes into QuickBooks, they go to their bank feed, and then they add income into QuickBooks from their bank feed. Okay, so now we have an invoice that's adding income to QuickBooks. Now we have the client recording income, and now we have duplicate income, and we have an invoice sitting there that shows up as unpaid because the client didn't know they're supposed to apply it to an invoice. They just recorded income again. So most of the time, these clients who are just connecting apps to QuickBooks, this is what they're doing. But they think like, I'm automating, right? So what is the correct workflow? Well, you're going to have a customer invoice sent over to QuickBooks from the app, but you still need a customer payment and a deposit recorded in QuickBooks. And then you need to match it in the bank feed. So someone has to still do the green boxes here. Someone has to enter a customer payment. Someone has to enter a deposit to make sure that so that it follows the workflow in QuickBooks. And when I mean workflow, it's just the steps. So the workflow in QuickBooks for an invoice from beginning to end is an invoice, a customer payment, a deposit, and then you match it in the bank feed. I did a separate webinar, I think a couple of 2-3 months ago about workflows in QuickBooks, and I gave you all the charts. So if you have that webinar, take a look. If not, look for it in my YouTube channel. So again, it's just this like disconnect of clients think they can automate everything. And then you realize that, well, no, because the app is only doing a partial piece of this income workflow. And we still need additional steps to make sure it gets done correctly. And so we really need to be able to dissect the transactions and the workflows to understand exactly what the app is doing or not doing. And I think that's really the key in developing those diagnostic skills and advisory skills to help clients is to understand what should the workflow be, then what is the app doing, what is the client doing, and what's missing. And I talked about reconciliation earlier. So as I said, the app may be sending transactions to QuickBooks, but you might be missing transactions. There could be duplicates. There could, data might have changed since it got sent to QuickBooks. And so you need to have a process of reconciling, whether it's deposits, expenses, inventory, other types of transactions. And so that's one way of reconciling. The other is, as we'll get into, is also the data dump. So now let's say that the app sent 50 transactions over to QuickBooks, but how do those transactions now reconcile to what's happening on the bank statement? And what we find most of the time is that there is no reconciliation. So the data dump just goes in there and we don't know what to do with it because we have no way to now reconcile everything that's happening with the deposits being received. And yeah, Janine says, I had a very similar problem with House Call Pro that no one was reconciling the deposits from undeposited funds. So going back to this example that in this deposit piece wasn't being made. And so then undeposited funds just kept growing and growing. All right. So as I said, reconciliation. So let's talk more about that. So in an e-commerce situation, we see this a lot. So you may have an app that is sending individual invoices or sales receipts to QuickBooks for each sale, say in this case, in Shopify. Okay, so for day one, let's say your client may be using Shopify. They made multiple sales on that day and they total at $800. Well, we won't see a deposit in QuickBooks for the funds received from Shopify until maybe day 3, day 4. And then it's going to be a net deposit because Shopify will deduct fees. And so now what we will see in the bank account is just $760. All right. So let's say the app sent individual invoices to QuickBooks, and now we have a deposit of $760. Perhaps in this case, we could go in and go into Shopify and figure out what invoices made up this deposit. But let's say that now these multiple sales were 100 a day, 500 a day. I mean, it could be thousands a day. Now it's going to be almost impossible for us to go in and have to look up every deposit, figure out what invoices did it pay, and go into QuickBooks and manually enter those customer payments and then make a deposit. It's not something that's sustainable, but we see this all the time. And so again, you really have to be careful with what type of integration do you have going into QuickBooks, and especially Shopify, Amazon, a lot of the e-commerce, Stripe, Square. You will see multiple transactions and then a net deposit in QuickBooks. And then it's like, okay, how do we reconcile these? How do we apply this deposit to all these detailed transactions? And in most cases, you don't want those detailed transactions going into QuickBooks. Okay, there we go. All right. So how does this affect the invoices and deposits. So let's say we have those multiple transactions that are getting sent to QuickBooks. Now we have 4 different transactions for 4 different customers. And then we have that deposit in QuickBooks that is, as I said, net of fees. So we have to apply that $760 to those individual customer invoices, and we have to record fees. So as I said again, maybe it's easy if you have just, I'm going to say 20 or so transactions per day. But if you have hundreds, thousands of transactions, this is not going to work. So again, we're dealing with the giant data dump and these net deposits, and we have no idea how to reconcile those, how to apply those payments. So, and then taking it further with e-commerce transactions, typically in e-commerce, and this will be the same most of the time for point of sale systems, that the best practice now is to use clearing accounts. So they're right here. So let me explain what clearing accounts are first before I get into the chart. If we're thinking about using Square, for example, most of the time when using Square or a point of sale system, you're giving the customer the option to pay you in different forms of payment, maybe credit card, cash, or check. So that's for a retail type facility or restaurants. You'll see that a lot. For e-commerce, it gets even more complicated because, let's say for Shopify, in Shopify, sellers can choose to accept multiple forms of payment. So they may choose PayPal, credit cards, buy now, pay later options. And so now we're giving customers all of these different ways to pay. So now think about the data dump. Okay, so the multiple sales on the left of all of these customers buying all of these things. And now we're dealing with multiple payment processors or multiple ways of getting paid. It could be Shopify clearing, which is credit cards, PayPal, Amazon, Affirm, which is a buy now, pay later option. So now we have hundreds of invoices with multiple payment options. And now I have these net deposits in QuickBooks for these different payment options. And I have no idea what goes with what, because again, I have the giant data dump and one net deposit. So this is where, again, we have to be really careful about thinking about connecting clients, QuickBooks to an app, or when they come to you like, oh, I want to connect such and such to Square, or Square and QuickBooks, or Stripe and QuickBooks, and this app sounds like it'll do everything we need. There's a lot of things we have to think about before even deciding to make that connection. And really, is it worth it? Because of the additional reconciling that will have to be done. Oh, and Lynn says, Intuit tells us to contact the app, and the app tells us to contact Intuit. And yeah, so when you have these integration problems sometimes, and then you're like trying to get help from say PayPal, and then PayPal says, no, we don't do that. You got to talk to Intuit. And then Intuit says, no, that's PayPal. And we see that even with Shopify, that Shopify all of a sudden changes things, and then the connector apps don't work. Or Amazon recently changed how you manage deferred income. And so you may even have an app that's working great, but if the app decides to change something, then, you're stuck with it. Okay. So not to discourage you, I think this is just a great opportunity for us to then be able to come alongside clients and really be the hero, because now we're coming and saying, that, and maybe that's not the best thing to do. Here's why. We could have duplicated income. We could be cluttering up your data. Your reports will slow down. it's not really automating everything. It's only automating certain things. And so now that you know these things, you can come in and, like I said, be that hero for that client, be that advisor, lead them in the right direction. So let's say that a client is coming to you with a cleanup of, okay, I connected such and such app to QuickBooks and I have a giant mess. And that happens a lot. Okay. That's most of the cleanups that we did at Mavency was that sort of cleanup of I connected QuickBooks and PayPal and now I have a giant mess. I connected Shopify and QuickBooks and now we have a mess. So let's talk about some app integration cleanup strategies. First of all, you need to be able to identify the red flags because a lot of times clients either they'll tell you they connect. Well, actually, many times clients think that QuickBooks is bringing data directly into QuickBooks from an app, but they think it's doing it magically. Like they don't know that somewhere along the way you connected an app. Okay, they don't know that. They just said, well, QuickBooks did this. Well, no, you connected to an app. So the first red flag is what I call app amnesia. So the client thinks that QuickBooks is magically recording transactions and they don't even know that they're using an app. And or they may say, well, I connected something. Do you know what it is? No, but it said QuickBooks. Okay. We don't even know what it is. And so they may not even remember. So they don't know. They think it's magical that somehow data is just coming over or that it's an app, but I forgot what it is. So you can go into QuickBooks and look up all of the different app integrations that they have and know what they are. I think it's in the books review, and you feel free to correct me if that's not the case. I believe it's in the books review. Data. So the next red flag is the data dump in QuickBooks, which I've talked about a lot. So, and some of the clients that would come to us to clean up their books who were e-commerce clients would say, well, yeah, all of a sudden I have, 3,000 sales receipts and I don't know what to do with them. Or you can easily just see all the individual transactions in their QuickBooks, and you'll probably see tons of things in undeposited funds. You'll see their accounts receivable is exploding with invoices. And you may see next duplicate income because they may have invoices or sales receipts from the app, and then they'll also have income from deposits. And so a lot of clients will even be able to tell you, my income is duplicated. I don't know why. So now you can start putting together the pieces of that puzzle because you understand where these things come from and how they're happening. More red flags, growing undeposited funds, as I said before, that these invoices are going into QuickBooks and then payments are getting posted to undeposited funds and then not making it out of undeposited funds. Growing clearing account balances. So for e-commerce clients or sometimes for point of sale clients, we'll see accounts like Stripe clearing, Shopify clearing, Amazon clearing, PayPal clearing, and those balances keep growing and growing and growing, but they're not clearing out. And the clearing accounts are sort of like accounts receivable for each of the payment processors. And so again, they can go up, but they need to be going down. And then you may have payment processing fees that are not being recorded. So what cleanup strategies do we have available? Okay, so number one, you need to start with a paid diagnostic review. Which, for any cleanup, you should start with a paid diagnostic review, but especially in these situations, because you won't be able to just look at their QuickBooks and know immediately that, oh, we have problems. You have to look a little bit deeper to assess the extent of what's in there and to be able to then come up with your findings and recommendations for your client for again, the extent of the data dump and everything else that needs to be cleaned up. Gain an understanding of the client's business, the apps that they're using, and existing workflows. So again, sometimes it's like, well, I don't know if that I'm using an app, but by the time you do that diagnostic review, and definitely by the time you finish the diagnostic review, you need to know all of these things. Identify all the red flags that I talked about. Assess and look at your connected apps and the sync settings, as I mentioned before. So how is the data flowing from that app to QuickBooks? Can we change the account mapping? Do we have to push a button to send things to QuickBooks? Is it sending it automatically? Then consider how that app is affecting existing workflows. So as I said before, is it just sending invoices? Maybe it's sending invoices and customer payments. Are the customer payments going to undeposited funds? Should they be going to undeposited funds? Or is the app sending over vendor bills to QuickBooks? And, what else is it doing? And then you also have to ensure that there's a proper reconciliation between sales and deposits. So as you can see, a cleanup for a client who's using an app integration is a lot more involved type of cleanup. And so we need to price it accordingly. You need to do that paid diagnostic review. You probably then have a cleanup portion to that engagement. And you probably, I would say, have like an advisory or consulting portion, because we have to clean up the books, but we also then have to figure out do we need to be using the app? Or if we're going to use it, what's the best way to use it? If we're not going to use it, how do we want the transactions recorded into QuickBooks? And so these can turn into very profitable engagements. So don't be deterred. I think it's just more of, you will likely see these types of cleanups come your way. And so make sure that you review all of the handout and refresh yourself on all of the red flags, the things that you need to be looking at in order to then approach these cleanups the right way. So the big question is, should an app be synced to QuickBooks? Is it our go-to? And I'm going back to the original question. Have we been misled? I think so. I think we have been misled. And so then we need to be asking ourselves, should an app be synced to QuickBooks? And especially when that client thinks that, like, oh, it's the best thing ever, I'm going to connect this app. Sometimes we do have to burst their bubble, but we're saving them a lot of money and headaches from, messing everything up. So in many cases, connecting QuickBooks to an app is not the answer because of all of the potential integration problems. And my answer to when people ask, like, oh, I just got a client and they're using such and such, point of sale system for their salon, and how do I connect it to QuickBooks? I would not be asking that question. I would be avoiding connecting unless there was just a really, really good integration. So what if you have that cleanup client that comes to you and now they have a data dump and everything is messed up? We have duplicate income. We have accounts receivable that is not clearing out. We have clearing accounts that aren't clearing out. We have messed up inventory. I mean, you name it, they have it, because the apps affect everything. So here are some strategies. So should you clean it up or should you start over? So if the client has been using QuickBooks for a year or less, I would say just dump it and start over. And if you know me, you know that I'm not a proponent of starting over, but sometimes the data dump is so big that we're better off starting over and recording things correctly rather than trying to deal with thousands of transactions and sometimes even trying to clean up a file that is so slow that it is just going to be painful. If the client has been using QuickBooks for more than a year, it makes sense to, consider whether it makes sense to keep that file. So consider not using the app integration. Consider whether it makes sense to just delete and void the transactions that were sent over by the app to QuickBooks. And you do have some tools for deleting transactions. You can delete invoices within QuickBooks in the accountant tools. You can use Write tool to delete transactions. And then you also have deleter apps like Succinct that will also delete transactions. So consider whether it makes sense to do that. And if you're not going to use the app integration, and if you're going to delete all the bad data, then how do you get the transactions into QuickBooks? So say for sales type transactions, you can use the daily sales method. If you don't know what that is, hopefully Jill will share the link to my YouTube video where I have that. If not, go to my YouTube channel to find that video. Regardless of which option you choose, the sales data must reconcile to deposits and other relevant transactions. So again, even if we're going to start over, clean it up, however you get those transactions into QuickBooks, whether it's detailed, summarized, etc., you have to have a process for reconciling all those transactions to the amounts received from the payment processors, from Stripe, Square, Shopify, etc. So what are our takeaways for today? Beware of the data dump. So beware of the thousands of transactions going into QuickBooks. Understand the app being used. Understand the account mapping and how it affects QuickBooks. Understand how the app affects your QuickBooks transaction workflows. Understand that transactions synced by apps must be reconciled to banking transactions, and an app integration may not be the best solution for your client. So let me know in the chat, did I burst your bubble? Or do you feel kind of like we've been misled? We've been told to connect apps to QuickBooks, and now Veronica's telling us that no, don't do it. So let me know in the chat, maybe if I've burst your bubble, or if I hopefully have given you some good information that you can use and take for your next client projects. And then hopefully feel like, hey, this is going to be helpful for me. Alicia says she feels validated. Yes, Alicia. There we go. I love it. Yes. And I've been saying it for years. And I know, I'm the first to admit I'm an old school accountant, but you know what? Old school has worked for years, and we can modernize old school, but sometimes the new school things are not working the way that they should be. So, and I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox here. So guys, if we're scared of artificial intelligence, we really shouldn't be, because they can't even get the integrations right. So if you're scared about being replaced by artificial intelligence, we're nowhere near being getting to that point, because we're still struggling just to get integrations working. And so it'll be several years before we can worry about artificial intelligence. Now, having said that, should we be working with it and embracing it? Yes. But don't be scared of it, because there's so much more that our industry has to do before even getting to that point. And even if they got to the point of artificial intelligence is doing all these things, if we're still dealing with these types of restrictions and of problems, we're a long way, okay, from being replaced. So let's see. Janine says, she says, this is very validating. Oksana says, totally makes sense and great for bookkeeping business. Golda says, I actually feel so much better. I thought that was the problem and that integrations don't work. No, you're not the problem. The integrations are the problem. Jennifer says, thank you. This will help me advise clients to not integrate. Miranda says, great info. You pretty much validated how I was already approaching this with my clients who would like to have more info about clearing accounts. This is what I'm using right now for Stripe. Laura says, good and bad regarding apps. Old school here. Yeah, I mean, same here. But usually it's the customer that makes the mess. Yes. But just think about if you have a superpower for cleaning up all this stuff, then you would become very valuable to those clients. And Sarah says, and AI cannot do basic math either. Correct. That Mamila says, very informative. So thank you. Nicole makes so much sense from someone with experience. Valerie says, thank you for validating what I was thinking about integrating apps. And I'm not going to read all the comments, but thank you. And so again, this empowers us. This makes us feel and understand our value. We're not being replaced by apps. We're not being replaced by artificial intelligence, not anytime soon, in my opinion. And so this is where now with this understanding, we can develop the skill sets to be able to help clients who then are really willing and able to pay for your expertise to help them with this. And especially if you're going to prevent them from making some big mess. So let's go over some resources. And some things that we need to go over before I answer questions. So for resources, go to my YouTube channel at 5mbvideo.com. Check out my YouTube playlist on QuickBooks Online Cleanup and Diagnosis. And I actually have a new playlist on Diagnostic Review and several new videos that are coming out about Diagnostic Review. So look for that. We'll talk about 5MB Academy in a moment. If you want to know more about e-commerce, clearing accounts, payment processors, etc., take a look at the Maven-C e-commerce video tutorials. So Maven-C is a company that I founded, ran it for 15 years, and then sold it to two of my managers as of the end of last year. So you'll see me on some of those videos, but I explain all of the e-commerce things, and then Maven-C are now the experts in e-commerce. So if you have some clients maybe that come to you with these giant, big cleanup messes and you don't know how to approach it, and then Maven-C are the ones to contact to help you with that. And sign up to be notified about my latest content, webinars, and courses. So we have the link as well as the QR code to sign up for that. So before we get into the questions, I just quickly wanted to talk to you about 5MB Academy and how you can build the bookkeeping business and life of your dreams. So as I said before, I feel like I know I'm living the dream of owning a farm, building a house there, making my husband's dreams come true. He wanted to be a farmer, wanted to have land, and we were able to make that happen. And yes, there have been lean years in my bookkeeping business, and they have been some very good years because of all the systems and processes that I put into place in the business to run profitably, to be organized, to feel like we're doing something sustainable and not just like taking any client for any amount of money for anything, any service, because after a while that just gets really old and you can't build a successful business on just reacting to all these types of clients. And so one of the areas in which I developed this expertise was cleanups. So my team and I worked on hundreds of cleanups. I developed a proven system for diagnosing and cleaning up the books, which led to profitable and organized cleanups. My signature course, I have now since made it my signature course because I want every bookkeeper to be doing paid diagnostic reviews. So my system and course that I put together is the QBO Paid Diagnostic Review System. This is a complete process for discovering and diagnosing your client's biggest QBO messes. So you'll learn how to get paid before you do the cleanup. You'll be able to follow a proven step-by-step comprehensive diagnostic checklist where I take you step by step. You'll be able to show your value clearly to your client because you will give your client a report of findings and recommendations. This is an online course you can do at your leisure. You get lifetime access. It includes video tutorials, the comprehensive checklist, the report of findings and recommendations template, step-by-step tutorials, scripts that you can use to offer the diagnostic review to your clients, as well as to how to present the report of findings to them, lifetime access. So for that course, you have the link there, and I believe that Jill will share that link with you. So that is the QBO Pay Diagnostic Review System. So, and then my students said, well, can you teach us cleanup? Okay, because they were all asking a few years ago, teach us your diagnostic review. So I did. And they said, well, teach us how to clean up the book. So I said, okay. So I put together my other course, which, by the way, both these courses are bestseller courses at 5MB Academy. So this is the QBO, or rather complete QBO cleanup system. This is the all-in-one system to clean up QBO with confidence. So you get a clear roadmap to tackle cleanup jobs, detailed checklist, and walkthrough step by step. Again, I go step by step to diagnose and clean up the biggest QBO messes, clean up workflows, clean up pricing strategies. It includes video tutorials, cleanup checklist, the balance sheet reconciliation to the tax return, cleanup solutions. Again, step by step, account by account, I work through a messy file and show you all the things that you need to be looking for and cleaning up. And again, you get lifetime access. So as I said, these two courses are my best-selling courses. And you can always get the two courses bundled for the best price. Okay. But, there's more. We are running a spring savings sale. So, for a week, you get a 15% discount on all courses on 5MB Academy. Use coupon code SPRING15 off in the checkout page, and you'll be able to get a discount on all courses and bundles. So the sale ends on April 29th. And so you have some links there to the cleanup courses and then all the courses. So all the courses are on sale. I just told you about a couple of them, but we have a lot more courses on 5MB Academy. And Sarah says, well worth the investment in the bundle. A couple of paid diagnostic reviews will pay for the bundle. Absolutely. And that's the way I price my courses, is that I want you to get your money, to earn the money back very, very quickly. So if you go through the training, implement, you'll be able to make that money back very quickly. And Mindy says, and I saw that, Mindy, because and by the way, both courses now give you access into my private Facebook group, where my students go in and ask questions, and I answer your questions. The other students may answer questions, but I answer the questions that you have about diagnostic review and cleanups. And in many cases, people who maybe are stuck in a situation that they don't know what to do, then I will answer you. But yes, I saw Mindy, because I let her into the group, and she got the growth bundle on sale. And Carrie's looking at the roadmap plus bundle. So in case you're wondering what the roadmap is, the Virtual Bookkeepers roadmap is one of my premium programs, where you can implement all of the workflows and strategies for growing your bookkeeping business from a workflow standpoint. So client onboarding, document management, monthly bookkeeping workflow, quality control, team communication, selecting apps. So the Virtual Bookkeepers roadmap covers all of that. So make sure that you go to 5MB Academy and take advantage of the discount code. So the sale will be in effect for a week. And if you have any questions, just use the contact page on 5MB Academy. That'll go directly to me. So if you have any questions about any of the courses, let me know. Let's see. And Mindy says it's an investment of time and money that will come back to you in so many ways. And I really hope so, because guys, as I said, the key for my success was systematizing my business, and that I did that all on my own because I didn't have the resources that we have now. And there are many people teaching in this space, but when I was doing all of this, it was just me figuring it out on my own. And I invested a few hundreds of thousands of dollars, at least $250,000 in developing my systems and processes. And so, you can accelerate your journey. You can be profitable very quickly, and you can implement proven strategies. Because as I said, like with cleanups, we did hundreds of cleanups. All right. So I'm going to get into Q&A, maybe about 5-10 minutes. So if you need to go, I understand, watch the recording. So let me switch to that very quickly. Let's see. Stop sharing. And hold on 1 second. Just have to get this set up. Share screen. Technology is not what I want. Okay. Well, I'm doing something wrong. Okay, let me try one more time and then switch screen. Okay, it's not working, but I'm just going to go through some of the Q&A. I hope that's okay. Let me get that in front of me. From Andrew, do you experience, hold on 1 second. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to go. Do you experience a lot of pushback from clients when advising against apps, especially if they're already using one or more? No, but I think that comes from how you're positioning yourself. And are you coming across as someone who's credible and who has that knowledge and experience, and to really tell them why? And especially if they're already using an app and it's messed up, they more than likely want to stop using the app. That's usually what I see. Christine is asking about clearing accounts. So it says to go to the Maven C YouTube channel, which will get into a lot more about clearing accounts. But essentially, clearing accounts are a way to manage different balances that are due to the company from different payment processors. So Shopify is a perfect example of they may be using Shopify Payments, PayPal, Amazon Pay, Klarna, Afterpay, etc. And so then you have to be able to manage all of those balances that are due to the company from the payment processors using clearing accounts. Lynn is asking, if the client set up the apps, then we can't launch them to adjust the settings. What do you recommend to get access? It depends on the app. Many of the apps allow the client to set you up as a user. I've had some clients who have shared their credentials with me. I don't like that, but if that's the only way that I can go in, then I will do that. But usually you can be added as a separate user. Oksana is asking, so what would be a reasonable monthly fixed fee per platform after cleanup is done without taking software costs in account? Well, a lot of that depends on the client and their industry. I do have a course called Simple Pricing System that you may want to look at on 5MB Academy, where I get into just more of a simple way of pricing based on revenues. Gold is asking, how about the connector apps? I'm a big fan of A2X. I love A2X, and I do recommend using A2X. Bookkeep is another that you can use. I'm not familiar with other there's Cinder is another. So there are some that are good connector apps, but you have to do your due diligence based on what I talked about today. Cameron is asking, does a third-party sync circumvent a book closure and or completed reconciliation? I'm not sure if I understand your question, Cameron. I'm sorry. Does a third-party sync circumvent or go around a book? I think what you're asking is like once you've reconciled everything and closed the books, will will the like say the like Shopify can Shopify change things? It can. It depends on the app whether it allows that or not. So that's something important to know. And any opinion on integrating Braintree with QuickBooks? We've had in the past clients who were selling on Shopify that would use Braintree, and then it all flowed through PayPal, I believe. And we actually don't. I'm not a big proponent of even using the new PayPal integration nor the old one. And so we would use a summarized journal entry from PayPal to record transactions into QuickBooks, and we would record that once a month. Alicia is asking, what do you charge for the paid diagnostic review? I'm putting together a video, actually that's going out in the next couple of weeks probably, on how much to charge. So look for that. So subscribe to my YouTube channel, and that video is going live, and it gets a lot more into how I do that. Wendy's asking, what happens to transactions that come in from the app if you delete the app? They stay in QuickBooks. So if you delete the app, whatever went into QuickBooks stays in QuickBooks. So you'd have to delete those too. Claudette is asking, what are the documents I need to integrate on my website so I can start onboarding clients? Oh, I lost that. Okay. I don't use a website to gather information from clients. You can take a look at my client onboarding checklist that is for sale on 5MB Academy. And that will give you the exact onboarding process that I follow. But I don't get things or clients to go directly into my website to do that. Sherry Ann is saying, new restaurant client wants to use QBO, currently using Excel, uses Toast for point of sale, but Toast uses XtraChef to get to QuickBooks. How do I avoid a nightmare integration setting this up? I think I would reach out to XtraChef or look at their like knowledge base to see and learn more about the integration. And if you can't learn from the knowledge base, then reach out to their tech support and let them know that, hey, I'm helping a client, and then get more information about the integration and see if it would be a good fit for your client. Pam is asking us, are there any issues with the apps? Why is Intuit not fixing them? So I'm going to answer as it pertains to the QBO and PayPal integration that is now being rolled out. With most things with Intuit, when they roll something out, they are looking to do minimum viable product. So in many cases, whatever is published is not a full working version of what's needed. And they're looking for people to start using it and give feedback, or to use it and maybe it works for some clients, but not all. And then if the whatever, like say the PayPal and QBO integration kind of takes off, they will keep developing it. And sometimes what they do is that, hey, it doesn't work, so we're going to dump it and start over, which is kind of what happened with it. They dumped the old one, started over, and the new one isn't quite working as it should be. And so that's why I don't always recommend integrating or using some of the native QBO integrations, because a lot of times you have limitations, or you might start using it, but then they take it away. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for sticking with me and I'm sorry I had to burst your bubble about app integrations, but I think this is a great topic and great foundation for you to start building those skills and helping your clients to identify whether an app integration is the way to go, to help clients with their cleanups, and to really develop those advisory skills that, everybody talks about. Bookkeepers need to develop advisory skills. So this is one way in which you can do that. All right. Very good. We will see you next time. Take care. Bye.